The whole why we're the worst tour, Lakefront Brewery, their truck pulls out in front of our place like 9 days a week. and it has a big thing on the side of the truck that says we're the best tour in Milwaukee. So
they pull up, they block our garage door for an hour and a half every day, and then they just sit there.
So we're like the worst tour in Milwaukee.
Because we didn't actually want to do tours. We're kind of like, well, this is kind of lame.
If you come to the tour, it's going to be bad. That's all. I can guarantee that.
Not only bad, but the worst.
It's going to be the worst.
Cheers.
You have stumbled into the Tap Takeover Podcast interview recorded on September 26th, 2017.
Tap Takeover, Tap Takeover, Tap Takeover.
Welcome back to the Tap Takeover Podcast Brewery Series. I'm Jesus along with Jim and Andy. Today we're at Black Husky Brewing in Riverwest. We're sitting with Toni and Tim Eichinger, the two owners of the brewery. They wear many hats at the brewery, as you will find out. This is a labor of love. They have a great passion for creating great beers. Some of the topics that we will be discussing are how they got started brewing, what happened that made them say they can do this at a larger scale. We'll talk about their first brewery in Pembine that they started in 2010 and the move to Milwaukee last year. We'll definitely talk about the awesome new brewery, the equipment, their capacity, and their thoughts on distribution. We'll get a little serious when we discuss the reputation they got for being a little difficult. They have embraced it and have a good reason for doing things their own way. Of course, there isn't a Black Husky Brewery without a Black Husky. We'll talk about their nearly 17-year-old Husky, Smokey, and the impact she had on the brewery. If you're wondering what Smokey looks like, you can see her beautiful mug on her own bottle. She can be found on the Smoke Monster. As we do here at the podcast, we do a little tasting. Welcome, Toni and Tim, and we're going to start with the Oktoberfest beer that you just released. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. First of all, it's called a Jodler Konig, which is, Jodler Konig means yodeling king. Kind of named after our son, actually, Jake. We taught the yodel, and he won the yodeling contest at German Fest one year. So, kind of, we have a German heritage we're pretty proud of, so that's kind of what we started with for the Oktoberfest. This is actually my first lager, and that even goes back to when I was homebrewing. I did do, when I was homebrewing, one lager, and it ended up tasting like a Belgian beer, which of course means it was a total disaster. Okay. So this is the first lager, and actually I got my tips on how to do this from Leosh over at Lazy Monk, who is in Eau Claire. Oh, and Leosh, he's from the Czech Republic, and so I always say I have a Polish friend and a Czech one too.
Okay.
So
it's too early for this kind of humor.
One of the challenges of brewing lagers, of course, is the very low fermentation temperatures. How did you overcome that? Because you've got very large fermenters in your brewery. But
yeah, it's not that hard. Now we've got such a nice temperature-controlled system that actually, it's pretty easy. The thing is just knowing kind of the process that you go through for doing lagers. Ales I've been doing it. It's like a lot of this stuff is more about what you're comfortable with, other than it's actually that hard to do. People who do lagers all the time, and then you ask them to do an ale, they just kind of freak out. Well, I've been doing thousands or batches of ales. Now you got to do a lager. When I was up north, I had a good excuse not to do it. I couldn't do it because I didn't have temperature-controlled fermenters. So it was a nice way to weenie out of actually, doing it the right way. So I've been using like a pretty neutral ale yeast for years and years, USO5. It actually does a pretty decent job. You don't have a lot of, esters and things that come through. But I really thought it was time to actually do something a little bit better and be a little, now they've got the equipment to do it. That's why I went ahead and did the lager. It does make a difference. I would say that the malt bill has always been very, very continental, very German. It's all Weyermann malt. It's Slovenian hops. I used to, get into the argument with people. It's like, well, it's not really an Oktoberfest. Well, yes, it is. It's got as much. I mean, what makes it an Oktoberfest? So what makes it that style of beer? And of course, a lot of it's the ingredients and the process. Yeah, we're using an ale yeast, which is a big, is a big no-no. But a lot of people are using in their Oktoberfest, they're using all domestic malts and domestic hops. So what makes it authentically an Oktoberfest? So this year now we have a lager yeast. So this is you can't argue anymore. It is an Oktoberfest. And I really like it. I've been very happy with it. Going to the lager yeast, people always, how do you describe the yeast of an ale versus a lager? It's really hard to do that. People always say fruity, and I'm not really sure that's really what it is. But there definitely is a neutral character to lager yeasts versus ale yeast. And I think that really what happens with a lager is that it doesn't get in the way of all the other elements you're putting in. This does not have a hop profile pretty much at all. It's really, really hard to get to, which in my opinion is what you should have in this beer. But it's very malty. It's much maltier than most other Oktoberfests. So what really comes through on this is the maltiness, but because it's a lager, you don't have that sweetness that you get from an ale, that fruitiness that you have. So in my opinion, what happens with this is there's a lot of Munich malts in here, and Munich malts are malted differently than a caramel malt. You end up having sweetness and maltiness that tends to be more, I think they always describe it as bready.
Yeah, I think I'm getting more grain.
Right, right.
In an ale, you get a lot of sweet malty flavor. In this, it's more of a grainy kind of malt flavor, but it's not roasted at all.
I like the big malts in it. I think it's pretty tasty.
Thank you.
I mean, I like that you led with a lager because you do have a reputation for doing only big beers, but I think this is a big Oktoberfest. And that reputation follows you all the way back to Pembine. So what we'd like to jump into now is if you guys could tell us how you got your start in Pembine and a little bit about your first brewery.
Boy, how do we get our start in Pembine?
How'd you get your start in brewing?
Yeah.
That you tell that better.
Well, that's because Toni bought me a kit.
Yeah.
She bought me a kit for a Hefeweiss.
Well, because, and I'll backtrack with that, because we had moved up to Pembine from West Dallas in '99, and virtually no beer available up in Pembine other than, Bud Light, Miller Light, Michelob Ultra if you're lucky. That was,
Old style.
Oh yeah, you could get old style.
The 30 pack of hams wasn't there yet? Or?
Hey, I still drink hams.
Yeah.
Hey, we all do.
There was really lacking. And when we lived in town before we moved up, our favorite place was Kegel's in West Milwaukee. And of course, they had all the German beers on tap. That wasn't a thought that occurred to us that when we got up to Pembine, there would not be that. So we really were kind of searching for a long time for a decent beer to drink. And for Christmas one year, I got Tim a Hefeweiss kit. And that's kind of where it all started. I think we had been down to Milwaukee and had stopped in at Kegel's, and we just kind of all of a sudden was like, wow, we really missed this. And if you can't buy it, you got to make it.
So what was it that really spoke to you, Tim, that said, hey, this is something I really want to go gung-ho on?
It wasn't the Hefeweiss. I mean, I made the Hefeweiss, and I still do. I love a Hefeweiss. But one day I was going to go out and burn garbage, because that's what you do up north. You burn garbage because they don't actually have garbage pickup. You usually do it on a day like this. It's kind of rainy out because you don't want to burn the forest down. So it's a miserable job. You're going to be out there. You're going to smell like garbage when you're done. It's going to be raining. You're going to be, kind of wet and stuff. So what do you do? Well, if we might have to do a job like this, I might as well drink. So when we lived in Pembine, the nearest big town was Iron Mountain. And so we went up there to Econo Foods, and I picked up a 6-pack of Two Hearted Ale. And so I went out there and was burning garbage, drinking Two Hearted Ale, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best beer I have ever had. And so that's what kind of got me on the whole brewing thing. Before that, I did a beer here and a beer there, using the old turkey deep fryer thing. Yeah, that's how
Yep.
So you'd go through like 20 pounds of CO2, and it sounded like Cape Canaveral all the time when you were brewing. That was where I started, and I got my obsession with hoppy beers, because I would just brew the same beer over and over and over again, just change one variable. Maybe I'd do a different yeast, or I'd do a different hop, or I'd do a different malt. But I kept, I would just do one thing so I could eliminate what was the variable that I didn't like, or what I did like. So I would brew 3 times in a day, do the same thing, and it got kind of maybe a little obsessive. I don't know.
You think?
Just a touch.
So what was the beer that gave you that aha moment when you were brewing all those different beers to tell yourself that, hey, I could do this and start a business out of this?
It would have to be the Sproose, and the Sprouse thing was kind of that was one of those drunk talk things. I mean, not that anybody ever does that. I mean,
it's always well thought out
Never.
and planned for.
And typically that's what I do. I'm very, very, I can be very methodical about things. But I was sitting. We built our house up north. It's a log cabin, and I had some logs left over, and I built another smaller building, and we ended up keeping that and making it into brew house. And when you're brewing 7 times a week, you have a lot of beer left over. And so I actually started having beer on tap and stuff, so people would come in by us. They usually bring over like a homemade wine or something, and yeah, I'm like, okay, I don't want to drink this, or a bottle of Jaeger. So we drink a lot of Jaeger. But I was sitting there one night with one of my friends. I was kind of talking to him about the pale ales I was making and the hop forward beers, and I was saying I really am trying to get that nice piney flavor, where you get that real good. It wasn't so much the citrus now that you have; it was more piney back in the day. And he says, well, you got all kinds of pine trees around here. Why don't you just throw some pine in there? And I said, well, actually, they used to do that. When the settlers first came in, they didn't have hops, so they put spruce, and he didn't believe me. So I said, well, next time I brew, I'll throw some spruce in, and that's kind of how it started. Just from drunk talk. Just sitting around being stupid. So,
but even the first batch of that, I don't even think that was when you had to dial in much. That was like, bam, there you go. You didn't mess with that one much. You didn't.
No, a little bit I did, just because I thought that it needed a little bit more malt than just a regular pale ale. So, but over the years, it kept on getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. I think initially it was probably about like the pale ale, probably about a 7%, and it ended up being about an 8.5% to 9%, where it is right now. Where you have a decent malt backbone to it.
That's my go-to beer, always. I'll finish the day, and it's like, okay, I can get to go out to the tap room, have a beer now, and I'm always like, oh, I'm going to try something else today, and then I go and I pour spruce. So
you've always been known to make beers that you want. That's always been kind of a guiding principle of Black Husky. So I'm curious, is there a favorite style that you have? I mean, you make a lot of IPAs, but is that really like your go-to beer?
No, it's not actually. You can ask anybody, the beer tenders here. What I always drink is I always drink the Deck Dog. And the Deck Dog is basically my version of it's like Bitburger, somewhere between Bitburger and Rodeburger, and which is a German Pils, which is the IBUs on that are like 40, 42, and that's really what I like to drink. It's very clean. It's very bitter. If I go out, because I just had somebody ask me that today. What do you when you're not drinking your own beer, what do you drink? Part of it is it depends where you're at. I'll almost wherever I go to, I always have the double IPA. I love double IPAs. I love the hops, but I want the malt backbone. I don't really like the smaller. That's kind of where your palate progresses to, and that's everybody's got their thing. But stouts are okay, but I like that hop bitterness, but it's got to have a little bit of malt behind it, and that's one of the things I really like about the German Pilsners is that you've got that malt flavor, but then when you want to go to an IPA, I don't want that harsh bitterness that you get at the end. I want to make sure there's enough malt to support that hop.
So is there anything that you won't make?
I don't make sour beers on purpose. Sour beers, and I'm really, really trying with the sour beers.
Yeah, we've been trying when we go places to try one. But part of it is that I really don't, neither of us, we don't really want to have to work that hard to like something. Either I want to drink it and say, oh, I really like this. I don't want to have to spend like a whole lot of energy. I'm going to like this beer at some point if I just try harder. Every once in a while, we have one where it's like, yeah, okay, that's okay. Well, it's not probably anything we're ever going to brew.
Yeah, but I would like to try it. I really would, because I think some of the European style ones are actually more tart than they are sour. So, like, I had the Berliner Weiss from New Glarus, and I thought that was just done very, very, very well. Then I've had some other domestic sour beers that are just so sour. And I guess that's kind of, as Americans, we're kind of known for doing things over the top. But I think that could be more restrained. You don't have to have every single sour.
A lot of them, to me, taste like the pixie sticks that you used to get when you were kids. It's just so much that it's not, the first drink is maybe okay, but to have a whole glass of it is just like, I I don't find it that appealing.
So
Yeah.
not as balanced as you'd like.
Yeah,
it to be.
it's just a little, which is weird. It's kind of a weird thing actually to say, well, I don't like it being that much when my go-to beer is Sproose. But it's just that sour pixie stick is what I always think.
Yeah, and then you have your different types of bacteria you're putting in there and stuff, and the horse blanket flavor that people talk about. Like, I'm not really sure why you want something that tastes like a horse blanket.
So when did you start coming down to Milwaukee? I remember seeing the bottles at discount, and I remember liking the dog, so I started buying a lot of the pale ale. It was great. It was fantastic, and I was going to try to make the trek to Pembine, but then you guys came to me, so that was great. But when did you start? You opened in 2010.
I think. Well, we started in 2010. We started distributing down here in 2011. And I think part of the reason we did that was our son had moved to Alaska because Jake was the one who was really into dog sledding. So we had 23 sled dogs. And then he moved up to Alaska. Then he met a girl there, and they came back to Wisconsin, and they moved down to Milwaukee. And so we had been approached before that to bring our beer down here. Who's your distributor? It's like, we don't have one. Well, how can I get your beer? You can't.
You can't.
You can't.
Yeah, it's just.
But then when Jake and Lena were down here, it's like, well, I could drive down, deliver a few kegs of beer, see the kids, and then go back home the next day. So it just started out very like 4 or 5 kegs and a couple of cases.
It was kind of funny too because we didn't actually ever market anybody. What had happened was that a couple people had some of like the Sproose in particular at a beer festival we had done in Eagle River, and somebody that worked at one of the distributors had gotten hold of a couple bottles and really liked it, and actually that person had gone to like Sugar Maple and a couple places and said, you really should, we don't distribute this, but you really should try to get this. So actually it was somebody that worked for a distributor that talked to Sugar Maple and said, you should get this. So we had a couple places call us that way, and then after we got into 1 or 2 places, then it just kind of took on a life of its own.
So are you saying you drove down those cases to discount?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Still do.
Wow.
Still do every single thing that's delivered. I think there was one time I didn't make the deliveries. No, you did it one
I
time.
did a
You
couple.
and Blanche went down,
Yep.
and then this last
Wow.
summer when we were first opening up, Michael did some deliveries
Yep.
for us one day.
So what's your current volume?
Right now we're probably about 700 barrels a year, which is still pretty small. Our capacity is about 2,000, but we do things our own way. We're pretty small. We've been approached by distributors over the years a lot, but I just, Toni and I talk about this because one of the things that I can remember sitting down with her and talking to her about this, and I had Howler with me, who was the Black Husky, and saying,
Smokey's dad.
do you want to start? I'm like, I think I can do this. I think I can do this professionally. And she's like, all right, if we're gonna do this, we gotta do it our way. We're not gonna compromise on stuff. We're not gonna dumb down our beer. It's gonna be a lot of work, a tremendous amount of work. And if you're gonna put that much work on the stuff, do it your own way. Because otherwise, you're better off keeping your day job than you are doing what we're doing. Because it's a lot of work. The only thing you get out of it is that you really enjoy what you're doing.
So many years into it, I still don't draw a salary.
Yeah, and but that's just
tough,
so. Yeah, it is. It's a long game when you're looking at what we're doing. So the only thing at the end of the day you have is the integrity of you doing things the way you want to do it, because that's the thing that you can say, well, I don't know, maybe you're rationalizing. I don't know. Either way, you say, well, we're not making a lot of money, we're doing it our way. God
No,
damn it.
but that does kind of, I come across that when I work with a glassware vendor or a t-shirt vendor. We take it all so incredibly personally. And when you're dealing with different businesses, other vendors sometimes, I don't think they're not always used to dealing with the people that own it fully and are just on every little detail all the time. So where it can be sometimes as if we're overly picky or hard to work with, I think part of it, we probably are a little bit difficult, but I think part of it is that people aren't necessarily used to working with the owner of something. They're working with an employee or who does have, a goal, something they're supposed to be accomplishing, but at the end of the day, they don't really care. They care a little bit, but they don't care if it turns out 100% perfect. Where when we work on something, it's got to be perfect. And so that's where probably we get the reputation of being a little difficult to work with. with.
Don't say we. Don't say
no.
Okay, fine.
It's her as much as it is me.
Oh, okay.
You know
We're
that
just difficult in our own areas.
that's understandable. When you do sign it with a distributor, you do give up some of your control. As Third Sign, the retail arm of Octopi, found out, they're essentially had to shut down because of their difficulties with their distributor, who eventually got sold, and yet they're still unable to distribute, even though their distributor no longer exists. So that can really put you in a bind in a small organization like this.
Well, yeah, and you've got to think about the long game. That we talk a lot about that. You got to look at what's going to be happening. Not just today, and maybe that's because we're a little bit older than most people who are in this business. Is what's going to happen? In 5 years or 10 years. What are you going to do with this? Yeah, maybe you can do. To me, I'm always looking. We have our different roles, but I'm always looking at how hard do you want to work for the margin you're making. Yeah, you can sell a lot more beer, but if you're selling canned beer, a 4-pack of canned beer, your margins are pretty low. So in order to actually make any money, you have to distribute a lot of cans. But in order to actually get into a lot of places, you have to sign the distributor. The distributor wants 40% of that. So now you got to make even more beer. So now you got to buy more equipment. Well, I don't have the money for equipment. Where do I go? Well, I'll get some investors to come in. So now you start compromising. It's not just one thing. You're not just saying, well, now I have a distributor. Well, now you have investors too, and now they're whispering in your ear, or sometimes they're not actually whispering. There might be a little more aggressive than that. And so what happens is that gets back to what Toni said back in 2009. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it our way. Sometimes it seems a little bit almost regressive, but it isn't. It's staying true to those very, very core principles. We're going to do it slow. We're going to do it our way. We don't want to get a lot of people involved. It's not a big dick measuring contest about who can do more barrels than anybody else. Yeah.
We are a bit controlling, but I like the fact that we work directly with our accounts. We have a stupid little process of checking kegs in and out when Tim makes deliveries. And when I check them in, the empties that he brings back, I kind of go through and I'll look at it and I'll say, oh, gee, you brought back a keg of Sproose from this date, but they had a keg of Sprouse from before that didn't come back. So that's out of rotation. That keg of Sprouse should have been used before the one you brought back. And I'll email or call them and I'll say, hey, you got a keg of Sprouse from this date. Do you know where it is? Why it's not on? And 9 times out of 10, we use the small 6 kegs, so it gets lost behind a half or a quarter barrel of something, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, we'll get it on right away. We like that level of control, that especially for the hoppy beers, if we're putting it out, we want those rotated properly. We want the freshest beer getting out to the customer. And if you go with a distributor, nobody's doing that. The distributor's not doing that for you.
That's the great part about being owning your small business outright. You can hold everyone accountable who wants your beer. So while we've been talking, some more beer magically appeared in front of us. So what's the second beer that you guys have chosen?
Sproose.
Awesome.
This is our signature beer. That's just kind of maybe it was drunk talk, but still, the thing about this is that every single beer we do has a dog associated with it. Right. So this was my dog was really Howler, and he's the Black Husky. And Howler was a special dog, and he was very, I don't know, how would you describe him? He was very social. Whereas a lot of the Huskies are kind of, they kind of are, a little bit off-putting sometimes. And
he was very social, but he was kind of arrogant and independent also.
Surprisingly, we got along together, eh? But now Toni's dog was not social at all.
He only liked me.
Yes, and he bit everybody. Absolutely, he was a biter,
much like his owner.
Exactly. And so Lothar is the dog on Sprouse.
Yeah, and he really, I always call him my shadow. He just was always by my side. He did not leave the room, without me, or let me leave the room without him, and didn't go to bed unless I went to bed. And he just was always, but he really was the perfect one for Sprouse, because it is kind of a biting. It's not for everybody. Some people have it and they're like, oh my God. And actually, when we when we first opened back up in Pembine, we tried to do a little bit of tours and tastings for a little minute. The very first tour that we did, or tasting, a gentleman came in and we went through 5 or 6 beers, and he drank that and he spit it out and he said, "That is the worst beer I have ever tasted. If you guys think you're going to get anywhere with that, you should stop making that beer." And this was a guy from up north. And it's funny because we still see him when we go back up to do the Wasaki Fall Festival. We've seen him several years, and he'll always come up and he'll say, "You don't make that spruce beer anymore, do you? That was awful." And then, we always have to tell him, that it's...
Well, but he had a marketing background.
Yeah, he had a
He was a retired guy up there.
Right.
And so we always screw with him a little
Yeah.
bit like that. But because like next weekend we'll be up there, because we never sold a lot of beer up north, a little bit here and there, but we had one account up there in Newingham's and Wasaki. So every year we do a fall festival there, and the weather is always horrible. And that guy shows up every year and
Always tells us we shouldn't be making spruce.
yeah.
Did you tell him that Sproose helped you guys build your brewery?
Absolutely, we tell them that's the main one,
Paid for the tanks, right?
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting, it's an IPA with actual spruce in it. And for me, the spruce accentuates the piney flavor of the hops without being overpowering. I think it comes across quite well.
And it's real spruce. We go out to the woods and we've got a lot of spruce trees on our property. And so we just, take some of the branches off. I always take it off I have, a variety of trees. I never take it off all one tree, trying to practice sustainable forestry, my spruce harvesting.
So how much of your production is the spruce?
Oh, geez.
That's a good question.
It's actually I'd say it's probably 20 to 25% of everything we do is spruce.
I would have thought it was more, actually.
Yeah, that's still pretty. I mean, it's only 25%. That's a pretty good breakdown in the pie.
Well, it's not new grist or anything like that. Like what those, I think they do like 200 barrels a week.
I will say too, you have people come in sometime and they'll want to try something, and you'll start talking to them and they'll kind of explain what they like. A lot of times I'll say to them, just try this. And it's a beer. Take a little sip, try it. It's not, nothing's going to happen to you if you try a beer that you're not sure about. 9 times out of 10, people will say, "Oh, wow, I never thought I would have liked that." That's always kind of fun. I remember one lady in particular that goes to the Discount Crafts and Drafts Festival every year. And the first year I met her, she came up and she said, "I hate IPAs. Give me something that's not an IPA. I never found one that I like." I just kind of, messed with her a little bit, and I said, "Okay, you just have to try this one." And she just loved it. So every year now she comes up and she'll always say, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "Yes, absolutely I do." I think that's the fun part of getting people to try something that is not, if you're just going to give people, "Well, I like browns," or "I like whatever," get them to try something else.
You're getting them out of their comfort zone.
Yes.
Just like you guys don't like sours, but you'll still try them.
Yeah. So that's the fun part.
All right, well, I think this is a good time to stop, take a little break, and get some more beer. And we're going to come back and talk about their new space, their move to Riverwest, and their future plans. So let's take it to some beer news. We'll be right back.
That's right.
Welcome to a special edition of Beer News. Jim filling in for Andy, who's on hiatus. All these bottle releases are within the next 4 days in the greater Milwaukee area. We start our journey with the brewery of this episode, Black Husky. Today, Wednesday, November 22nd, Black Husky releases Head Butter, a bourbon barrel-aged barley wine. This barley wine has been sitting in a bourbon barrel for over 2 years. And to quote Tim, this release is older than most breweries in Milwaukee. November 24th, Black Friday brings us Milwaukee beer lovers a ton of tough choices. Starting at 6 a.m., the Explorium in Greendale releases its bourbon barrel-aged version of its cherry chocolate stout. This stout was also a collaboration with Cigar City out of Florida. Lakefront's Black Friday releases at 8 a.m. We suggest getting there early this year, as a 1-bottle limit for their very special edition will be available to the first 700 people. This XXX Reserve Black Friday is a blend of the previous 3 years of Black Friday. Now you can get this, as well as the 3 bottles of the regular Black Friday, which have been aged in rye whiskey barrels this year for the first time ever. This event is always a blast and a must-attend event for the Tap Takeover Crew every year. So we'll see you in line super early, and maybe we'll share a beer or two with you. At 9 a.m., both locations of Discount Liquor will release Goose Island's Bourbon County brand stout, with some of these special variants available as well. If you don't want to wait in line to purchase Bourbon County at 10:30 at Stubby's and 11 a.m. at Brass Tap, you will be able to buy a glass. Both of these great beer bars will have the 2017 regular Bourbon County and the barley wine variant on draft. At noon, Third Space will be pouring out 2 years of Liquid Laird's barley wine with 2 variants of it as well. If you're a barley wine aficionado, make this stop, as a flight of it it's only available on draft and only while supplies last. Also releasing at noon on Black Friday, as if it couldn't get better, Baloba Russian Imperial Stout aged for 9 months in bullet bourbon barrels. At Raised Grain, the annual Santa Sack Spiced Ale Winter Beer. At Like Minds, a spontaneously fermented sour saison finished with Wisconsin cranberries and aged in wine barrels. And it continues, my friends. At 2 p.m., Urban Harvest releases their Imperial Chocolate Whiskey Stout. At 3 p.m., friends of the show, Enlightened offers us limited 2-pack of the Human Condition, a French saison with lemon peel and elderflower. If you haven't had your fill and passed out, or maybe you've just stayed away from the release madness, the Harley-Davidson Museum has its annual Black Friday Beer Fest from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. This is an epic and historic release weekend for all the breweries in the greater Milwaukee area, and the Tap Takeover Podcast and beer lovers everywhere salute you and say keep up the good work. Don't forget, there wasn't enough. The coveted CBS Canadian Breakfast Stout from Founders will make its return the first week of December. It was last released to the public in 2011 when Founders decided to put KBS bourbon barrels and then into Canadian maple syrup barrels. It has been a highly sought after beer ever since. You can bet the house that people will be stalking liquor store beer managers as to exact delivery times. Make sure you do the same. And this has been Beer News.
That's right.
That's another wonderful and informative beer news. I can't wait to hit some of these places that you've talked about. We're back here at Black Husky in Riverwest neighborhood of Milwaukee. Again, magically, beer has appeared in front of us. I love this place. We got a real special treat here. It's the 2016 Sparkly Eyes, an Imperial IPA, 10.4% full of malty and sprucey goodness. Tell us what we're supposed to be tasting here, Tim.
Well, this is probably Spruce is like 106 IBUs. So Spruce is like I say, it's like 8.6, 8.8. Actually, I just brewed this today for release later on this month. So this beer we're drinking now is at almost exactly a year old. For a 10-barrel batch, I used 1,400 pounds of grain, which is a lot of grain. It's a lot of bags to be lugging around. But this is very different than Spruce. Visually looking at it, the color is almost exactly the same color as the Oktoberfest, just to give you a reference. But it's a totally different type of grain bill, totally different on the hops. And I think the IBUs on this are closer to 90 than they are 106. This is a malty beer. It's got a lot more malt in it. It's got a lot more spruce in it. What happens is that when you start hitting it, that malt with that spruce, the pininess goes away and you end up with more gingery flavor to it. And I think that's really what you get out of this. After sitting for a year, probably the hops have died off a little bit.
Not much though. Boy,
Well,
it just
But it's to me, we talked. It's candied raisins a little bit, but I mean it's gingery. It's very different.
I have a terrible story about this I should not even tell, but I'll tell it anyway.
You gotta
Please
it now.
tell it now.
So last year when we were moving down in June, and I mean it was a mess. I mean it was just, we were trying to not have any disruption in service between going from Pembine to Milwaukee, so to not stop operations at all. And so it was pretty insane. And at one point we had to pack up all the beer that was in Pembine and bring it back down. And apparently I packed up a case of odds and ends of beer that I was going to bring down, but left them on the floor of the brew house. And we went back home a couple weeks ago and I was cleaning up some stuff in the brew house and I lifted up a big pile of stuff and here was this case of beer that has just been sitting on the floor of the brew house for the last year, since last June, all through the hot summer, winter, spring, all this summer. And it had some bottles of Sparkly Eyes and several other beers, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I left this stuff just sitting on the floor of the brew house, totally improperly taken care of for a year's time. So I took a bottle in the house and put it in the refrigerator of Sparkly Eyes, and we cracked it open that night as part of our Adele concert.
Yeah, Tony, we always have to listen to Adele.
We always watch Adele concert at night when we go home. Don't get me started. But we cracked that open, and it was spot on. It was just like, so usually I'm not a big one to say, yeah, cellar your beer. Apparently you can just take Sparkly Eyes and put it wherever in the trunk of your car.
It'll survive the
and
seasons.
it's going to be awesome a year later. So, but it was just spot on. It was just really fun to taste.
Let's talk about the move to Milwaukee from Pembine. Out of all the locations, why Riverwest?
We initially started out doing I'd come down and visit Jake and Alina and bring a few kegs and some bottles, but then it turned into, well, now we need 10 kegs and, 14 cases, and next thing you know, we're at 30 kegs, and so it's like, we have to come down to Milwaukee. That was obvious.
I grew up in the south side of Milwaukee.
Tony's got a lot of family around
My
here.
family's all here, and then Jake, our son, and Lena, our daughter-in-law, are here, and we have a 4-year-old grandson. So that was pretty much a no-brainer. When we wanted to expand, but at the time, we had been talking about it for years, but we had 23 dogs at home. Yeah, and we talk about it loosely, like, what are we going to do someday? And didn't take it seriously for the longest time because we had 23 dogs and we weren't going to get rid of the dogs. So it just kind of, as things kind of developed, we didn't have a place in Pembine to expand to, and that just wasn't the place. And the fact that all the beer was coming down here, my family's down here, our grandson and Jake and Lena are down here, it was just pretty obvious. That wasn't even a stretch. As far as the Riverwest neighborhood, we wanted a neighborhood. That was the big thing. So when we started looking at different properties, different buildings, and we looked at some in, more south and
Kind of the Bayview,
Yeah.
Walker's Point area.
Up north, back home, we lived in the woods, literally. We were miles off the main highway and lived in the middle of the woods. Everybody around us is weekend cabins. It was not unusual for us to go days and not see anybody. We wanted, when we looked at areas in town, it needed to have trees. It needed to have a neighborhood feel to it. Riverwest is actually a lot like Pembine in its social interaction. So while it's not in the middle of the woods, the way people are in Riverwest are the same as people back in Pembine.
Well, because up north, one of the things people complain about is people are always up in your business, and that's the same. but that's the same thing in Riverwest. Everybody's always up in your business all the time. But they're also the first ones to pull you out of the ditch.
Yep.
And the first ones to help you out and stuff too. So I think that's kind of that kind of neighborhood stuff where people are overactive to a fault. We had people say, "Are you really going to go from Pembine to Riverwest?" And these are guys that live out in the suburbs, and they just don't understand what a neighborhood is like.
But and that's what is weird is because this is a neighborhood in the city, but there's a lot of the same feel as the Pembine community. Back at home, you have bars that small town bars that you go to where you go in there and you'll be sitting there and somebody comes in with a bag of tomatoes and says, "Hey, Joe's going to be in on Thursday. Can I leave these tomatoes for him? He's going to pick them up." And just that kind of community thing. Bars back at home, somebody's have a birthday party or a shower, baby shower. They don't have space at home, so they hold it at the town bar. The bar is, doesn't charge them for space or say, well, you got to do this and that. You bring in your crock pots, you set up, you have a party, you buy some beer from the bar. That's what we do here.
We don't have a banquet hall, but if you want to come in and set up and do something,
we got the
go
tall
ahead.
table on Bremen Street.
As long as you get a plate, right?
No. You have a plate and drink a beer. Don't carry in your PBR.
We really just wanted that neighborhood trees and when we were driving around some of the neighborhoods, it was so much concrete that we were like, that's not, and we weren't doing a strip mall in the suburbs. So it just kind of, when the realtor said we were getting a little frustrated because we weren't finding anything. And then he was like, well, there is this one building in Riverwest. It'll be a lot of work. He sent us a picture. We were back at home on a phone conference with him, and he emailed us a link to a picture of it, and both of us were like, yeah, that's it, set it up. And it didn't take us any time at all.
Well, actually, I want to touch back on you have 23 dogs. Are they like on the labels? How do they become involved?
Every single dog that we had has to have a beer associated with it. We don't have them all yet, but we're getting there. Some of them are like we've got like Lothar is on Spruce and Sparkly Ice. Howler is on the original Pale Ale and Howler. So we've got a few more beers to do yet.
Is Howler the main logo?
Howler was the Black Husky. And if you come down here, you'll see his that he's on the logo. We got a 6-foot round picture of him in the tap room. We've got a chainsaw carving of Howler. Maybe a little obsessed about Howler a little bit. I don't know, but he was just he was a good shit.
One of the things I absolutely love about what you guys do is not only do you feature a dog on each label, you've got these great, amazing stories behind the beer, like talking about Sparkly Eyes here. It's not just that Lothar, is a dog, great dog. He actually had psychic powers, and he used his Sparkly Eyes to control people, and he led the New Earth Army to resolve conflict worldwide. That's just who comes up with these stories? They're just so much fun.
That one was mine, and probably we're gonna get a cease and desist from George Clooney now, I think, because that does come from. So Sparkly Eyes is a really convoluted story. It's got that story to it because Lothar had this thing that he would do where because he always hung out by me. He would come and he'd stand by my chair and he would just rest his chin on my chair and he would just stare at me, be just totally locked in, and just to make sure whatever I was going to do that he didn't miss out on. And we were watching Men Who Stare at Goats, the George Clooney movie, one night, and they went into this thing and I was like, oh my God, that is exactly what Lothar does. He's doing Sparkly Eyes technique on me all the time. And so it just kind of went from there. And when we did the Imperial version of Spruce, it had to be Sparkly Eyes because it just was, in my head, made total sense.
But we also did the more cowbell with that, though, too, because when I was making this beer, wanted to do an Imperial version of the Spruce, and because Lothar was Tony's dog, she got the approval. And I did more test batches of this beer than anything else. But one night, we were sitting there, and we were watching TV and drinking some beer, and we're actually watching reruns of Saturday Night Live. So I gave her my latest version of the Imperial Spruce we're going to do. It was the cowbell skit with Will Ferrell
and Christopher Walken.
We'd had quite a few beers at that point. And so I gave her so she turned to me and looked and said, "This needs more cowbell." So that's why, we always have cowbell associated with the...
So it's a bit confusing to people sometimes because it's Lothar and it's a goat and it's a cowbell and people are like, I don't get what's happening here. But it makes total sense to us, and we will be happy to explain it when people come in. And actually, the first couple of years we put it out, we actually hand-tied little cowbells and put them on the bottles. I missed a couple of years of it because I couldn't find the little cowbells, and I was really amazed that I actually got emails from people saying, I got my bottle of Sparkly Eyes, but there wasn't any cowbell on it this year. And so just so people know, this year there are cowbells again on Sparkly Eyes.
All right.
So I really recommend everyone go to blackhusky.com to really read about the stories behind the labels. It's so much fun.
It's kind of interesting. I did get an email from a marketing person. We had made the little announcement that we were going to move to Milwaukee, and I got an email from somebody that was a marketing person saying, oh, I saw your labels and I've had your beer, and it's a really cool thing that you do, that you have dogs on your label. And then they said that's a cool gimmick that you came up with to put dogs on labels because people love dogs and beer. And I was so incredibly insulted that somebody thought I just Googled random dogs to put on our label. So anybody that knows us, we take it incredibly seriously. The dogs on the labels are dogs that were part of our family. We only have Smokey left now, but for us, the dogs on the label is our way to keep them in our memory and, just to kind of hold to that. They were faithful friends for many years. Smokey is almost 17 years old. When we were at home in Pembine, the dogs were all with us for those 17 years.
Serves as a great memorial
Yeah,
to
it's
your
really,
beloved
it's
pet.
very personal.
So with the move to Milwaukee, room to grow to your capacity you have now, more dog names to name beers after, and your focus on the long term, what do you envision for the future of Black Husky?
I think that, a lot of people are looking at the distribution model, but I don't really think that is the right business model for most breweries right now. What I see is a lot of people who are, how many breweries do we have in Milwaukee now? Probably 30, And I think that, and honestly, when we do our tours, like we do 2 tours a week, and we do them on Saturday. I bet you 60% of the people that do tours,
We like the background noise.
probably 60% of the tours that we do are from Chicago. So there's a lot of people that come up because we got a really good brewery scene here in Milwaukee right now. We're relatively, the price point is good. I really see that the future is, rather than people going out and buying beer, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be stopping in at places. Whether they go out on their bikes, whether they where they drive, where they Uber from place to place, is you're going to see a lot more people going to, on a Saturday or a Sunday, 3 or 4 or 5 breweries in a day and trying different types of places, different types of beers, and I really think that's the model going forward.
We think a lot of people assumed when we moved to Milwaukee that we had signed with a distributor. And I just talked to some people today in the tap room that were sure that we had gone with a distributor. It was just an assumption that was out there, like, well, okay, you're in Milwaukee, you're gonna go to a distributor, and we didn't, and we don't plan to. And we just really feel that beer, this is probably cliche and everybody says it, but beer is or should be local. I think that we're heading back to local neighborhood breweries, just like back in the day where you had your local bakery and your local butcher. That's how I grew up on south side of Milwaukee. You had your butcher shop, you had your bakery that you went to. I think breweries are headed back to that. This thing of shipping beer all over the countryside, nothing irritates me more when I go someplace at the county parks or someplace. We went down to Jazz in the Park, which is real close to our apartment. There were no Milwaukee brews at Jazz in the Park, and there was a Surly. And I'm like, really? You got all these breweries in Milwaukee, and we have Surly at Jazz in the Park in downtown Milwaukee, where we have how many breweries within 2 miles?
And we can actually throw it back to a couple of our previous interviews that we've had where they feel the same way. It's going back to more of a, like you guys chose to be in a neighborhood, a local neighborhood establishment, like, back, 100 years ago, this area would have been considered a town.
Yep.
And each little town had its own brewery that people went to for their beer.
Well, and Milwaukee's got that neighborhood thing going. We've got all the neighborhoods named, and
You're really going back to what you had. I love going to, everybody wants to see Norm at the end of their bar, right? I walk in, I see Chuck, I see, I see Sam, I see all these guys, Victor, all these guys that come in, and I think that's really cool. I love the regulars that come in.
we had hoped for that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
And we got that pretty quickly. We weren't sure. We had really hoped, in our view of what our tap room was going to be, that we had that regular. Where's Paul?
And beer is a social thing, and that's what my big fear about beer is that it becomes wine, wine is an exclusive drink, and beer is an inclusive drink, where people get out there and you bring a lot of people into it. You have a couple beers. So I love my one-offs. I love the doing things that are different. But at the end of the day, it's a social thing. And what beer does is it gets people. So people aren't talking about politics. They're not talking about
the divisive things.
All the divisive things. Yeah, they're talking about all things that are what do we like. So if you can make the world a better place by talking about beer and drinking beer and agreeing on something, then all of a sudden those things that everybody disagrees on kind of fade off into the background.
Well, this is all very nice, but we've heard that you have the worst pour in Milwaukee.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like you're a teddy bear, but can you tell us a little bit of that reputation?
Well, basically what happens is that the whole tour thing, I think, is kind of kind of odd because
Well, it stems from the Miller tours where it was just like you go on a bunch of tours and you get drunk.
You walk from building to
Yeah.
building and you see this, and with ours you're like standing in one place and you're like looking back and forth. Nobody wants to learn about how to brew beer. They don't want to know about your process. They don't want to. I mean, people are not like going to be impressed with our bottling operation. What everybody wants to do is they want to learn about what makes you different. How are we different than somebody else? What we do is when we do our tours, we have a rough script of what we're supposed to do, and then things kind of change. So like a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday, it was when Don Williams had died, and Don Williams was considered the gentle giant of country music. So apparently we're really old because I did a little post on that and had 0 responses on it.
Crickets.
And
actually had people say, I don't actually know who Don Williams is.
So what I did that day is we did a tour, but then I did Blue Eyes Crying, and I sang Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain for people because that was a twangy. So all day long in the tap room we played twangy.
We only played
music.
Don Williams style songs in the tap.
And so those are kind of fun things to do, where you just kind of bring your own kind of flavor into things, have some fun with it. The brewing process is the brewing process. It is what it is. Everybody uses pretty much the same process. Some people are better at it than others, but it's still the same thing. So I mean, that's our idea is that the whole why we're the worst tour. Lakefront Brewery, their truck pulls out in front of our place like 9 days a week, and it has a big thing on the side of the truck that says we're the best tour in Milwaukee. So
they pull up, they block our garage door for an hour and a half every day, and then they just sit there.
So we're like the worst tour in Milwaukee.
Because we didn't actually want to do tours. We're kind of like, well, this is kind of lame. What are you touring?
I wouldn't go to tour.
You're gonna stand in the brewery, and we're gonna say, here's our 4 fermenters, here's our brew house.
Yeah.
Now what?
Once you've been on a tour, you've been on all the tours,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's all about the beers that distinguish you from every other brewery in the
No,
area.
I would no. I it's not just about the beer. It's about the story, about who you are, and what's the identity of you. One of our beer tenders here, Christopher, is a big beer trader. He's always bringing in stuff all the time. So he's like, I have Trillium. Like I drink more Trillium than anybody wants to drink. I'm so sick of Trillium, I can't stand it. But he brought in a funky Buddha the other day, and I was like, this tastes a lot like Liney's Fireside Nut Brown. It's very fake, very artificial tasting. And so, but I know, funky Buddha, everybody loves funky Buddha, right? But that's what happens, that kind of stuff, so. And I get people come in here all the time, they're bringing you bottles of beer, breweries from all over, the U.S., all over the world. A lot of these guys are using flavorings, and I can't do it. I can't go out and take something out of a vial and throw in, and that's like today, we did the sparkly eyes, and in order to get all the spruce out, I had to climb into the brew kettle. It was hotter than hell in there too, I'll tell you that, and pull that stuff out of there, so.
Yeah, so one of the stories is this old gal who's still kind enough to join us today.
Yep.
Good old Smokey.
That's not me we're talking about.
No. Good old Smokey, and we've got her beer right here.
This is Smoke Monster. This is 2013 Smoke Monster.
Okay,
so the
a little birdie told me that someone around here really loves Isle of Islay scotches.
Yeah, but this is not that smoky though.
It's pretty close though.
At this point, that a lot of the smoke has kind of faded, but it is definitely.
This is not everyone's beer.
No,
I
can remember I was at one of our accounts, and they said we had this one beer, and it was just horrible. We hated it. And so what was it called? It was called Smoke Monster. I said it was my beer. Okay.
Sorry.
But you get smoke on the aroma.
Yes.
But
you get smoke.
But in the flavor, it was a lot smokier, 4 years ago when we first put it out.
Well, and this also is another really convoluted label. If you see, when next time, we haven't brewed Smoke Monster for a little bit now. So when we brew it again and people see the label, it's, again, one that doesn't make a lot of sense to some people, but Smokey the dog is Smoke Monster. The reason that we named it that is that back in the day, some years ago, there was the series Lost that was on, if anybody remembers that, and there was a Smoke Monster in Lost. And Smokey just used to do a thing, and that's the picture on the label. She would dig these, Huskies dig, everybody knows that. But most Huskies dig big holes. Smokey digs a hole only as wide as her body, but as deep as she can possibly go. And what she would do back at home is she would just dig these deep tunnels, and she'd be gone. You'd look out and you couldn't see Smokey. You could hear her barking in the hole. Once in a while you'd see the end of her tail. So that's the picture that we'd put on that. And you would just see this big cloud of dust from where she was digging. So when we did Smoke Monster, it was like, well, that's obviously Smokey, and that's her digging the tunnel. So that's where we got the whole story from that. It's
not nearly as smoky as it used to be, though.
No, but it's
Yeah, I would say the aging
smoky.
is.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
cool.
I don't know what it was like originally, but I would say it's more balanced than it probably was. If you're saying this is more smoky,
It's pretty sweet. It's got
the malt's coming through more.
It's really more like a Scotch than it is a beer at this point, I think.
It needs more smoke.
I would kindly disagree, but this, I mean, it's really good.
Wouldn't
I
that
think
be a
4 years of
thing?
age is done well.
A smoky, sparkly eyes.
It's fantastic. No, it's really good. Thank
It's
you.
fantastic beer.
That again is one of the just fun stories on that. I kind of feel like sometimes people look at our labels and they're like, they must be, those two must be on something, because they don't always make sense. They make perfect sense. The stories and the beer names and the labels make perfect sense in our heads, that others get it, but
Yeah, so as you guys continue to grow somewhat up to your 2,000 barrel maximum, obviously you're probably taproom first, but with your dedication to put in a lot of work, you hand label all your 22-ounce bombers. But there's some discussion amongst the industry that's saying that the 22-ounce bomber is kind of a dying format. And are you going to look to change at all?
We're not going to cans. That's what we're going to.
Well, we're kind of leaning there.
we'll be the dinosaur. We'll be the dinosaur.
The 22s, yeah, they're definitely have kind of all and very rapidly went from being in, this is what everybody wanted to, like, nobody wants it now. If you still make a really, really good beer, people are going to buy it. If you do something that's exceptional, they're going to buy it. So I think where you're at, that's why I think the whole distribution kind of model is a little bit antiquated. If you put this beer in a 22-ounce bottle, people are going to buy it. If you're going to do a 6.5% pale ale, people probably are not going to buy it. So what you have to do is you just have to kind of change your approach a little bit. And so I think you're going to see what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a lot more of this kind of stuff. We're going to be doing a lot more big. And this is our core. This is what we do. We do big, obnoxious beers that people.
So many breweries will put out something like, well, we're trying to put out a beer that will appeal to a lot of different people. Yeah, we're not trying to do that.
There's a lot of people who are already doing that. Why would you want to do? We're not going to make Spotted Cow because New Glarus does an outstanding job of doing that. Why would you want? And that's the mistake a lot of people make is they see what someone else has done as a successful thing and they want to kind of do the same thing. It just doesn't happen.
When we put out some of this stuff, so here's Smoke Monster, or there's Sparkly Eyes. We like it. The people that work with us like it. We don't think that our 6 or 8 people are the only people that are going to like it. There's a whole bunch of other people that will like it. Is it millions of people? No. But we don't need millions of people to like it. Putting out something to dumb something down just so like you can sell a whole bunch more in cans, that's not us. That's just not what we're going to do.
We need to brew more Smoke Monster.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's just and part of it is that, and maybe like Tim said before, part of it might be because we are a little bit older than a lot of the people going into starting breweries right now, is you just have a level of who you are differently, and we're not trying to appeal to everybody on the face of the earth. This is what we have. Pretty sure we're not the only people that like this, so there's probably enough people out there that will like it, and that's all we need to worry about.
Yeah, so as we wrap up here, so folks can come down not only to the tap room to enjoy your beer, but you've got a couple events coming up. I think something really special for Ray's Growler Gallery. They've got a Behind the Beer series that you're going to be featured on November 2nd. Can you tell us a little bit about those special events?
Well, Rob Zellermeyer's been around in the beer scene in Milwaukee for quite a while. Over the years, he and I have talked a lot. And one of the things is that I've never been really happy with is kind of the number of brew fests we have. There's like 12 brew fests every single weekend, and it's the same thing over and over and over again. So what I
It's
would
really
like,
kind of drunk fest. It's not a brew fest.
but I would like to do something where people have a little bit more of a discussion. So one of the things that we're going to do is we want to talk about things that where it's almost more like a symposium in the sense that you're talking about a subject and getting different opinions on stuff. So you're out there, you can go and you can have a beer or two, and you can actually have some interaction with people who are on the business side. And one of the things that we're going to do there is talk about, does it really matter who brews your beer? I think that's one of the things that Rob and I talked about is when you look at, we talk about Funky Buddha. Funky Buddha, man, they did some outstanding beers. They got bought out. How does that change things? When you look at like Goose Island, they got bought out. How did that change their barrel aged beers?
They didn't.
Not. But I mean, their Goose Island IPA, definitely a different beer.
Yes.
Certainly not the same beer. So does it change? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, to a certain extent. So those are some of the things I think are important to talk about. How does ownership, how does investors, how all things affect the beer, the bottom line at the end of the day?
And because you have so many people that will come into the tap room. There are a million people that are wanting to tell you what you should do. Well, you should be doing this, you should be doing that, or why don't you do this, or you don't actually know what it's like to run a brewery. I think that discussion with what Ray's Growler Gallery is trying to put together is, okay, so you don't own a brewery and you want to come in and you want to ask questions and say, have those questions about, well, why don't you do this, that? Well, now we can tell you why that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And kind of that insider's view. We're running it on a day-to-day basis. We don't have people. Tim and I also kind of laugh because we get emails from people that will be like, please direct this to your marketing. And we look at each other and we'll say, am I marketing or are you marketing?
Is it Tuesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is that?
Let's flip the coin.
So I think that would be interesting for people to, it's him and I running it. You have all these ideas as a person that doesn't really own a brewery and you think, well, you guys should be doing this, that, or the other thing. Let us explain to you why that works or doesn't work. Because everybody wants to start a brewery. That's, I homebrew, I want to start a brewery, which is where we were at a point. But 6-7 years later, we have a few insights onto why we do things the way we do. Like we were saying, there are so many brew fests out there. It's getting kind of boring. So if you can have a different take on where you actually have a discussion, you have some time to talk. Yeah, you drink some beer, but you're all not just getting drunk the whole time. You're actually talking about something. I think that's maybe a new wave of where things could be going.
Before we toss it to Jesus to put a bow on everything for us, can you tell our listeners the brew room location and the hours so they can come grab a beer with you, maybe a questionable tour and a song?
Yeah, very questionable tour. We're open right now Tuesday through Sunday. We're at 909 East Locust, which is like 2 blocks west of Humboldt. We're in the Riverwest neighborhood, so we're actually not real far from like lakefront. But I think we're like a mile away.
It's actually, if you have a Saturday and you want to do something, there's actually 4 of us in the neighborhood now that would make a really nice little brewery tour. You can hit us, Gathering Place, which is just to the north of us, Company, which is just to the south of us, and Lakefront. We all know where Lakefront is.
Everybody knows
Everybody knows.
But we're right.
There's 4 of us that you could hit on a Saturday and get a totally different beer experience at each place. Company has food, Lakefront has food. I would suggest do a little Riverwest Brewery run.
But we have our tours on Saturday at 1 at 2 o'clock. You don't know, it's going to be, if you come to the tour, it's going to be bad. That's all. I can guarantee that.
Not only bad, but the worst.
It's going to be the worst tour in Milwaukee.
Because you're going to kind of stand in one place and you're going to stand there.
You're not going to move. You're not. So as far as touring I don't really know what it's French, so I don't really
It's
know
not
what it
touring.
means. But I mean,
It's
you're not
stand in
really
place.
you're not moving a whole
Yeah.
lot, but you are going to get some beer.
And
you know.
if you're nice and you're well behaved, Smokey might come out to visit you for
And
a
if
minute.
if you get yelled at, you probably deserved it.
Exactly. No.
Yes,
You
most
got-
certainly.
yes.
Goddamn right.
Yes.
All right. Well, Tony, Tim, we can't thank you enough for having us here. We're in the actually VIP room, cool space. It should be a retail space, but we'll get into that in the next interview. But thank you so much. And for myself, Jesus,
For Andy.
This is Jim.
Tim.
And Tony.
this has been another solid non-fail podcast. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.